Lesson 1. The drum set. Hand grips. To start, the first rhythm. The drum set. Let's get to know this instrument, which is composed of a series of drums and cymbals. The largest drum, with the deepest sound of the entire set, is called the bass drum. It is positioned on the floor and is played with the help of a pedal, with the right foot or left foot if you're left-handed. This here is the snare, which has a particular sound thanks to the metal strands or snare. The snare strand is composed of a series of metal springs that come into contact with the drum head underneath the drum. This is the snare strand, which vibrates the moment that the drum head is struck. You can insert it or take it off with the help of this device. Here we have tom 1, tom 2, and then the floor tom. Going now to the cymbals, these are the hi-hat cymbals. Here we have the ride cymbal and, in this case, 1, 2, and 3 crash cymbals. Now this is a relatively standard set. One of the interesting things about this instrument is that it is modifiable based on the musician's needs. Some use a more or less amount of cymbals or drums. Some add percussion elements. It all depends on the drummer's tastes and the musical genre one intends to play. The drums were invented around the beginning of the 1900s in New Orleans, a city where the so-called musical bands performed, typical of the Afro-American tradition. Bands composed of many people, and each person played a specific instrument, as we have today. When the time came where they had to play in smaller venues, some percussionists invented a way to play by themselves that which was previously played by a group of others. Therefore, initially joining the bass drum and the snare, and after that the ride, the toms, and finally the hi-hat. And this was the birth of the first drum set, thanks also to the influence of the various cultures and ethnic peoples of the region. Initially, the bass drum was played by kicking it. In fact, it was called the kick drum. In those same years, jazz music was also born, and the drums subsequently developed as an accompanying instrument to give rhythmic energy to this new and exciting musical genre. Hand grips. Let's see how to grip the drumsticks. The two fundamental grips used to play the drums are with the symmetrical hand grip, called the match grip, and the asymmetrical hand grip, also known as the traditional grip. Let's quickly say that neither of the two is more important than the other. The symmetrical hand grip is certainly more spontaneous, because it's what a young child would use if we placed a pair of sticks in his hands, and is what I personally prefer. To use this type of grip, you must insert the stick between the tip of the thumb and the middle of the index finger, thereby forming what we call the fulcrum of the grip. Later on, we'll see a variation of this. Next, you have to surround the stick with the other fingers. To play, you'll need to move your wrist up and down, also with the help of your other fingers. This is the case for both hands. Regarding the traditional grip, you'll form the grip's fulcrum by placing the stick in this part of the left hand. Right hand, if you're left-handed. You'll lean the stick on your ring finger and wrap the upper part with the middle and index finger. To complete the grip, you'll place the thumb on the index. To play in this case, your wrist must follow a rotating movement. To start. In order to play the drums, it is necessary to feel comfortable with the instrument and stable on the seat or throne, as it is called. In particular, the height of the seat, drums, and cymbals are rather subjective and vary based on your physical stature. The advice that I can give you is to position your drums close together, particularly the snare, at a height that allows both hands and legs freedom of movement while playing. This is very important, that your hands and feet don't get in each other's way. Now I'll show you what I call the starting position. That is the position to assume before playing anything. First of all, you'll have to place your feet on the hi-hat pedal and the bass drum pedal. Next, you must check that your arms are in line with your torso, not in front nor in back, and your elbows are completely relaxed. This is also very important. The elbows must never be raised while playing. Once you have done all of this, you take the sticks and form an upside-down V, gripping them as I showed you before. If the point of this V corresponds to the center of the snare, then you are at the proper distance from the drum set. If, instead, the point of the V is higher, this means you are too close. Vice versa if the point is lower. This is a good reference for having the proper distance from the drums. The starting position with the symmetrical hand grip is this. With the traditional grip, the position is this. One small technical note. With the traditional grip, the starting point is always the same, with the left wrist, or right if you are left-handed, in a vertical position. As far as the symmetrical grip, there are 3 different traditions. The first, the Germanic, is with the wrists horizontally, like this. The second, the French, is with the wrists vertically, the thumbs facing upward and the drumsticks almost parallel. The third, the American, is a bit of both. That means that the wrists keep their natural inclination, therefore neither vertical nor horizontal. Personally, this is the position that I prefer, because there is no preliminary movement to make before playing. You just have to raise your arms and leave the wrist in its natural inclination. The first rhythm. Before sinking our teeth into any type of theory practice study, I'd like you to play a drum rhythm right away, just to give you a quick idea of how this instrument works. The rhythm you're going to learn is what I call the first rhythm, because it is the easiest to play, and is a rhythm that can be heard in many songs nowadays. And as far as the tempo, once you've become confident, you can have fun playing while listening to your stereo, your MP3 player, or with your friends. To play this rhythm, without having any form of musical background, you'll simply have to keep 2 numbers as a reference point, dividing them into 4 syllables, counting like this: 1 and, 2 and, 1 and, 2 and. On the 1, you'll play both the bass drum and the hi-hat. On the and, just the hi-hat. On the 2, you'll play both the snare and hi-hat. And on the and, just the hi-hat. Now, to better simplify the approach, you'll start by working just with the first 2 syllables, counting 1 and. Let's see. 1 and 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 1. Next, practice the movements during the number 2 phase, counting like this. 2 and 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 2. At this point, you can put the 2 together. Begin by playing very slowly at first, in order to give your body time to adapt to the proper movements. 1 and 2 and 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 1. The next phase is to count up to 4, repeating the same movements that you were doing on the 1 during the number 3 phase, and likewise what you were doing on the 2 with the number 4 phase. Let's see. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 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 1. If you don't have a drum set, you can practice with a pad like this one, or play on any surface that has a good bounce. Without crossing your arms, in this case, and you can beat your right foot on the floor, left foot if you're left-handed, in order to simulate the sound of the bass drum, like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Once you're able to play this rhythm in a relatively relaxed manner, you're ready to begin playing the drums with your friends or home stereo, as I've already stated. Most of the music that you hear today is in 4/4 time, and we'll see what that means later on. What you need to know now is that it develops with repetitive blocks of 4 numbers. Your job is to correspond the 4 numbers of the first rhythm, which you've just learned, with the 4 numbers relative to the tempo of the song you've chosen to play with. I'd advise you to start with slow songs, and then, little by little, faster ones. One example of a slow song might be the Guns N' Roses version of Knocking on Heaven's Door. One a little faster could be Billie Jean by Michael Jackson. There you can easily tell the sound of the first rhythm. The first phase is to listen to the song, perceive the impulses of the tempo, and count them aloud, dividing every number in 2, just like you did with the first rhythm, like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Next, you can try to insert the drums. It's very important that you're ready to play while you're counting the 4th impulse of the tempo. The most common error a beginner drummer makes is by starting to play after having already counted the 1, whereas you must start to count exactly on the first movement. So you have to be ready while you're still counting the fourth movement. 4 and go. Another very important thing is not to become distracted by the variations that the song's drummer is doing while you play. Later on, you too will learn to play the necessary variations. Have fun.